Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is a weekend. I hope it has started well wherever you are watching or listening to this around the world. The final weekend, of course, before the final international break of 2024. Arsenal at Chelsea tomorrow in a very, very big Premier League game. Seems like we've been saying that a lot, haven't we? After the recent run of form for Arsenal, every game is big. Got to get back in the winning circle. Got to find some form. Got to find some goals, some creativity. That would be nice to go to Stamford Bridge and get a win. Would certainly give everyone a nice big boost and a very timely one as well ahead of the international break. So we'll talk about that in today's show. There's some quite interesting comments from Mikel Arteta about Raheem Sterling, which he said yesterday in his embargoed section of the press conference, which I thought were quite interesting. We'll talk about that. Got lots of responses from you guys on various subjects as well, which we'll get involved in. Look at the latest team news ahead of tomorrow's game, both from Arsenal and Chelsea as well. So plenty for us to get stuck into. And yeah, I thought we'd start on Raheem Sterling because it's been very interesting, I think, in the last two games, Newcastle and Inter Milan, when Arsenal have been chasing the game 1-0 down, and no Raheem Sterling. He doesn't come on at all in either of the games. And I know Sterling has not exactly ripped up any trees since he's arrived at Arsenal. But having said that, he has looked bright at times. Even the game, his last appearance against Preston, albeit, yes, it was against Preston in a championship side. But he was still pretty lively in that game and was very unlucky not to score. Could easily have walked away from that game with at least one goal, maybe an assist as well. So despite not being unbelievable in terms of form and sharpness, he's still getting in dangerous areas and causing teams problems. He did that in pretty much every single game he's played, barring, I mean, obviously he had a very poor performance when he came off the bench against Shakhtar Donetsk recently. I remember at the Emirates, not great. He wasn't great at Bournemouth before he got hooked after the red card, but he wasn't on the pitch for too long, it has to be said. But certainly in the game at Preston, I thought he looked pretty lively and was getting into some dangerous areas. So to not bring him on at all, I'm not saying start him by any means, but to not bring him on at all when you're chasing games and you're throwing on, obviously you put on Wanyeri, which I can understand, but you put on Zinchenko on the left-hand side in both of those games. You put on Jorginho at Newcastle, but you don't put Raheem Sterling on, a guy who scored so many goals and created so many goals during his time at the Emirates. I just did find it pretty eye-opening. And I thought it sort of obviously tells a story in terms of what Mikel thinks of Sterling at this point and how he's adjusted to life at Arsenal, that he doesn't trust him or think he's even worth a bit of a sort of Hail Mary late substitution type thing to go on and try and find yourselves a goal. I thought it was pretty interesting. And he was asked about that in his press conference. And this is what he had to say. He said, "It was a decision of mine. It's nothing to do with Raz. Somebody got it wrong and it was me. It's the feeling that you have and the understanding of how you can damage the opponent and picking a different player with a different profile for that moment." He was then asked, does Sterling still have a big role to play in the season? And Arteta said yes. I just thought that's quite interesting. He's basically admitting, he's saying he's made a mistake. So somebody got it wrong and it was me. So he's saying he got it wrong. He made a mistake. And I wonder if he does truly think that now, because to do it once against Newcastle, I thought was interesting or pretty eye-opening. But then to do it again against Inter Milan, you know, a player of that experience who's played that many Champions League games in Raheem Sterling, to do it again, the second game in a row when you're desperately needing a goal and you don't put him on, when you've got Trossard playing very, very poorly for large chunks of the game. Martinelli, who, you know, although he's been working very hard, it's not really been happening for him in the last couple of games. But so you don't turn to Sterling. It's, you know, when you've only got him for a year, I do think it says a lot about where he is. And I thought it was quite an interesting admission that he thinks he made a mistake. Because I do feel like Sterling could have done something in those games. I don't know if he would have done, obviously. And again, I'm not saying he's been brilliant since he's moved to Arsenal. I think he's been largely underwhelming. But to not use him at all, yeah, just thought it was interesting. I thought those quotes were as well. Let me know your thoughts on it in terms of where you are with Raheem Sterling at Arsenal right now. Do you think Arteta made a mistake in the last couple of games, not even giving him an opportunity to maybe come off the bench and change things? Or do you think he's just kind of wiping his hands with him right now and just thinking, you know what, he's not good enough. He's not going to make an impact on his team, so I'm not going to use him. Let me know your thoughts on it, as always, please, in the comments below. Right, moving on to team news. I did discuss this with James Benz yesterday on an Extra Time show. If you haven't seen it yet, this was the latest from Arteta in yesterday's press conference on Declan Rice. He had to say I was be very vague on that one. No clarity on whether he's going to be fit for the weekend, on whether it's a broken toe, like it's been reported, which it is. He says that's for the doctor. What I can say, he hasn't trained yet, and it's not clear whether he's going to be available to play. On Odegaard, he said everybody that's in the squad is fit and available to start the game. So then it'll be a decision whether it's too early or the right moment for him to make that step up. On Havertz and Marino, wouldn't really say anything, just said that Havertz had a nasty cut, couldn't continue at the weekend, and that Mikel Marino wasn't feeling great. But, Kai Havertz, yes, it was a nasty cut, but that's not going to rule him out of the game against Chelsea at the weekend. They'll patch him up, even if he has to wear something protective on his head. I'm sure he will, and I'm sure Marino will be available for it as well. So that's the latest team news from Arsenal. It'll be interesting to see if we do get some pictures of Declan Rice in training a little bit later on. I doubt it, because we know what Mikel Arteta does when it comes to that. I still don't get the whole playing with a broken toe. I just don't quite get that. I had a comment. Where is it? Is this it? Le Prof says, if Rice really is injured with a fractured toe, then it makes no sense to play him with this information already out there. The first thing Maresca will do is tell their players to rotate with stamping on his toes and hard tackles, which, to be fair, they probably will, because if you've got a key player of the opposition team playing with an injury, of course they're going to say in the training room, you think, well, look, Declan Rice has got a bad toe. Let's target that injury. It just makes perfect sense. And I'm like James was saying, they'll put an injection in and something like that to numb the pain. He'll get through the game. I'm just not sure that's a really wise thing to do. It just doesn't really make sense to me. If he's injured, he's injured. If it's going to impact his playing, if it's going to mean that opposition players might target that injury to try and get some sort of advantage, I just don't see the benefit of doing it. And I certainly don't see the benefit of him going over and playing for England in an international break with this injury as well. It makes very, very little sense for me. So I'd hope common sense prevails there. And to be fair, Declan Rice hasn't had the best of seasons so far either. He's clearly searching for his best form still at the moment. A little break right now might do him the world of good. And you can actually, I've been saying for a while, I just think Jorginho hasn't played enough minutes recently. Maybe you can bring Jorginho into the team and play him with Thomas Partey. Maybe that might lead to a little bit of extra quality going forward at the moment. We know Jorginho has the ability to play those sort of passes that maybe Arsenal have been lacking of late. And in terms of Chelsea team news, obviously Cole Palmer's the big talking point. If you're watching on YouTube, this was a picture taken before their game against what did James Bench call him yesterday? FC Biblical Characters. Noah, wasn't it? FC Noah. He obviously not in the Conference League squad, so he couldn't play in that game anyway. But he was watching the game. He was in the press room as well during that game. He was going and eating some of the food that the journalists get. And so Maresca was asked about that afterwards. He's obviously been struggling a little bit from that challenge he got from Lisandro Martinez in the United game last weekend. And Maresca said, Cole is getting better, but because he can walk and have dinner doesn't mean he's completely fit. He is getting better, and we still have a couple of days to prepare for the game. Hopefully we can have him for a session on Saturday at least, and then we take a decision. That's the only real doubt Chelsea have when it comes to injury at the moment in their massive squad that they have. They're all fit. That'd be very nice, wouldn't it, to have that sort of problem at the moment. And I would hazard a guess that Cole Palmer is going to start tomorrow. I'd be very, very surprised if he doesn't. So I wouldn't be taking him out your fantasy teams just yet, I have to say. Talking about fantasy teams, just going off tangent a little bit, I've transferred out Erling Haaland for this weekend. So if you've got Erling Haaland in your team and you're watching this before the deadline, I would triple captain him straight away, because he's clearly going to score 5 goals today now. I've transferred him out of my team. So yeah, a little word of advice, get him on a triple captain, because whenever I do something like that, it backfires massively. So yeah, there's the latest team news from Arsenal and Chelsea ahead of this big game tomorrow at Stamford Bridge. Oh, we've already done your comment, Prof, haven't we? Let's talk about Martin Odegaard now, shall we? This is what Mikel was saying about him yesterday. Obviously, it's a great boost to have Martin Odegaard back. No doubt about it. It was brilliant to see him come on against Inter Milan. I don't think the plan was for him to come on in that game, to be honest. So he only came on right at the end when Havertz got that head injury and was forced to go off for the lot, well, basically for injury time. And so they just threw Martin Odegaard on. I just don't think the plan was for... If he was fit and they thought he could make an impact in the Inter Milan game, they'd have brought him on with half an hour to go when you're trailing 1-0. The fact that he didn't come on and was only rushed on right at the end because of an injury suggests he's nowhere near ready. I cannot see a way that he starts this game tomorrow. But Mikel was asked lots of questions about him in the press conference. He was asked about if Martin can fix the attack. He says, we are demanding that, but it's not very realistic. It's about the collective, every player taking ownership with what we have to do in attack and doing it better and more consistently. But certainly having a player like Martin helps, because he's shown how important he is for us in the last few years. On if it's too simplistic that the team is going to click when he's back, he says we hope he's going to help, because he's been incredibly good for us and the impact he's had on the team. not only in that phase, but in other phases that are also linked to the attacking phase, especially the way we transfer from one to the other. He's been out for a while as well, so let's hope it's going to be very fast and that he can impact the team. I do think it's a bit simplistic. I'm not saying it's not going to absolutely change Arsenal. It will, but I don't think it necessarily 100% fixes the issues. I think everyone has to step up. It's too much pressure just to expect one person to come in and completely change things. Of course, it's going to help. It's going to help absolutely massively. But the other players have to step up and take responsibility themselves as well, and not just think, "Oh, Martin's back, everything's going to be okay." We need to get more out of Trossard. You need to get more out of Martinelli, out of Havertz, even out of Saka. It's not just about one player, and I think it's a sort of unfair pressure being put on the shoulders of Martin Odegaard. But it's fantastic, obviously, to have him back. There is talk that he could still go away with Norway during the international break, even if it's not to play, but just go and be part of the squad. I don't see the point in that. But that's certainly the talk over in Norway, is that Odegaard could still travel and be almost a cheerleader type figure in the squad. Mikel was asked about that, and he said, "Let's see how it goes, how he trains, if he's available, if he's fit. If he does play, it's about how he's feeling after that, and then we'll make a decision between the three parties." I just don't see the point. Just keep him at Arsenal for this 2 weeks. If he's not going to play over there, why would you send him over there anyway? I don't really get it. But obviously, it's going to be down to Martin. He is the Norway captain, so you can understand maybe why he would be keen to go over and help the team in any way that he can. There's a question here from Arpit, or a comment from Arpit, on why he believes Odegaard will solve everything. He said he's a leader, he can command the team. When he's on the pitch, everyone is on their toes. He can give the ball to anyone, and if they are not ready, they look incompetent. His pressing and ball carrying is what drove Arsenal into deep areas of opponents' territory. Major player returning boosts morale of the players, thus leading to higher performance. Faith. It's a nice last one there. And everything you say there is correct, and it is going to change Arsenal. There's no doubt about it. He will be so transformative because of everything that you listed there. It's not just about creativity; it's about his pressing. It's about he's the guy who leads the press. He's going to win. Arsenal you would think, going to turn over the ball in higher areas of the pitch more often than they have been doing when Odegaard's in the team, because he just does that, and he leads everyone else to do that because he's the guy who triggers the press, and he does it so well. So it's definitely going to be great. Will it solve everything? Again, I'm still leaning towards no, and just the fact that other players have to stand up. But everything you said there is correct. Obviously, he is going to have a massive impact when he is in the team and when he's starting. I'm not sure that's going to be this weekend, though. Okay, a couple of questions now before we wrap this one up. Here's one from Lost One Head. Says, a bit confused about Edu being on 6 months notice without actually working. Like, why won't he still be working for Arsenal for 6 more months? Isn't that the whole point, to make sure the club can have a smooth transition, find a replacement, or does that notice period mean something else? It basically means that he's not going to be privy to all the private information that Arsenal are going to be having. He's going to be going to work for a competitor. You get this in all industries, really. If some leading banker is going to move to a rival bank and he's got all his clients that he used to work with for an old company, then they're not going to let him then just go straight over there and work for the new company and basically be able to take his clients with him straight away. So they're going to put him on some sort of gardening leave so that they can sort of keep their secrets to themselves for a decent amount of time. And that's the same with Edu. If he works for Arsenal now for the next 6 months, he goes through the January transfer window, and then he knows every single thing that they're doing ahead of the summer transfer window. And then he goes and works with a rival straight away. There's so many sort of, really highly confidential stuff there that could impact Arsenal and could have a negative effect on Arsenal when maybe Edu decides, I know what they're going to be offering this guy. I'm going to try and get him to Nottingham Forest instead. And so I'm going to offer this money. So if they put him on 6 month gardening leave, he's not going to be privy to all the stuff that they're doing ahead of the summer transfer window. And that's not going to, give Forest any advantage. I'm not saying it would definitely happen or Eddie would do that, but it does. If he works the whole way through to the end, then it does sort of put Arsenal in a potentially difficult situation that he might be accessible to some really highly sensitive information. So that's the main reason why these sort of things tend to happen, unless another club pays a lot of compensation early, and you can come to some sort of deal like I think Manchester United did with Dan Ashworth in the end of Newcastle. Chris here gets in touch and says, when Arsenal loses, I completely avoid social media because our fan base can turn toxic quickly. As a journalist, I assume you can't really do that. How do you deal with seeing so much negativity from fans on social media? This channel is one of the few I still watch after a defeat because you don't overreact and look at things with some perspective. Yeah, it is tough. And I do try and look at things with perspective. I'm never going to be a channel that screams and shouts and demands sackings and everything like that. I am going to try and look at it with some perspective. I'll say they're not playing well and that people have made mistakes, but I'll try and do it in a calm way, because I get it. It gets to me when the top question there about how I can't really avoid social media. I need to keep using it. I need to monitor it during the day, so I do see it all. I see all the comments and questions and angry comments that flood in to all my replies. Not so much on here. It's certainly Twitter and X is just absolutely horrific, and I have moved away from spending all my time on that, and because it does get you down. And, I'm already disappointed after a defeat. It hurts as much as any other Arsenal fan. It hurts to do a defeat, and then to sort of have to deal with all the negative comments that sort of come my way after that as well. It is tough to deal with. I am getting on a bit now. I am used to it, though, I have to say. I think for a lot of young journalists coming into it, it's a real eye opener, and it can really get to them. I can sort of let it wash over me a little bit. I get, a lots of abuse sent my way over the last few years, that it does become sort of water off a duck's back type thing at the moment. So it is tough, and I absolutely understand why you stay away from social media after defeat, because I know a lot of people, and I understand people, look, they love their football club. When there's a defeat, a costly one, it hurts, and people like to vent that frustration, vent that anger. But obviously on social media, there's no sort of off button, and if people want to go over the top, they can, with very little fear of anything ever coming back to sort of bite them in terms of what they say. And so it is tough, and I would just advise everyone to sort of stay off social media after defeat if you don't want to see that sort of stuff, because we know it is rife. But yeah, in terms of how I deal with it, I'm just used to it, and I can kind of let it wash over me nowadays. It wasn't quite so easy when I was younger, I have to admit. And quickly, here's one from Charlie. He says, could you give some insight into the process of players carrying or coming back from injury that are called up for their national team? Are there talks between clubs and country? And ultimately, if the country wants a player to report, am I right in saying that the club can't veto that? Obviously, thinking specifically about Odegaard, Rice and Havertz for this final international break of 24. Yeah, you are right. If the country wants you to report, then the club have no right to say no. Obviously, if the player says I can't do it, then that changes things a little bit. And I go back to Thomas Partey last time with Ghana, because Ghana were quite keen to get him over there when he said he was ill, and he didn't go over there, and now he's being punished for it because he's not in this latest international squad. So the club do have very little say in the matter. There are always talks going on between the clubs and the international camps, and sometimes that can come to an agreement. We saw it at Havertz last time. He wasn't really injured. He could have gone away with Germany, but Germany were good, and they understood that maybe a break was best for him because he had played lots and lots of minutes. So you can come up with some compromises. But if the country puts their foot down and say, no, we want him to come over here and we're going to assess him with our medical staff, we're not going to take your word for it that he's injured, then the club can't stop that happening. He has to go. It's the rules, or the club are going to get a hit with a big fine with the FIFA regulations and UEFA regulations that are in place. So thank you very much for that, and everyone else who's been in touch in today's show. I hope you have a very good start to your weekend wherever you are. I'll be back in the morning to preview the Chelsea game, do my predicted 11, that sort of thing. And if you want to get involved in that, you want to give me the starting 11s you want to see for that game, please do that. As always, I'll pull some of them together and get them included in tomorrow's preview show. Until then, have a great Saturday, everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.